passes. Good evening. This is the June 2nd meeting of the Charter Committee. And tonight we're going to continue our review of the executive authority and see where that takes us, I guess. Everybody's here tonight, so that's great. No place they'd rather be. Beautiful summer night. All right, we got Mel and Anthony here too. Very good. All right, so we're going to start off. Guys, we're going to continue on with the document. Is that what we're going to do next?
I'll share it. I just let me know where you want to start. I think we're in the memo, right?
Yeah, we're using the prior memo from May 15.
Yeah.
And where I would like to start is Article 6. We began Article 6. We went to the select board in Article 3.
Yep.
And the appointment of the town administrator in Article 3 of the town manager. And then we started with Article 6. And I think it might be just good for us to go back right to the beginning and just review a few things.
Sounds good to me. Yep.
So I'll start with Article 6, Section 1, the powers and duties. Anthony, if you can get that one up.
Just let me know, Mel. I'm going to share. Let me make sure that this is the right version.
Yeah. I think so, yeah. Maybe you can just make it a little bigger on the screen, at least my screen. Okay. Very good, very good. So, you know, the Article 6, the town manager, is the companion article to the select board. Together they form the executive body, but they're always done in two separate articles. So we went through the select board, and there were a number of questions and issues raised, but really you can't, we can't start answering those until we get through the town manager also. So we're going to try to do that tonight. Beginning with Section 6.1.1, it just articulates that the town manager is the chief administrative officer of the town and is responsible to the select board. And B is supervise, direct, and be responsible for the administration of all functions under the town manager's control, as may be authorized by this charter, bylaw, town meeting, etc. Now that seems to be a catch here. It's one of the things I think the committee really needs to take stock in beginning tonight, is to decide who would be under the town manager's control under this new charter, you know, if they're not under the control, would there be any coordination or other activities that the town manager would be able to exercise in those elected boards? So I think with that, let's go to the next page and see. C, I think we had a little bit of discussion at the last time about the town manager's power to delegate. And I think there was some concern raised that, well, you know, it's great if the town manager delegates power to someone good and responsible. But what if they delegated something to someone who made a you know, judgment or maybe an ethical lapse or whatever, and would this come sort of back at the town manager? And you know, those are questions that probably relate to the specific issue that's involved. But in general, this language does exist in most charters, and so at this point, I really don't think I could answer that any further. And Betsy, if there's any other questions on that, we can talk about that now, but otherwise we'll move on.
Anybody? Okay, keep going.
All right. Now, D is, I think, probably one of the key provisions in this section, and so we began to talk about it. And D talks about appointing and removing all department heads that are non-elected. Of course, the town manager at this point is not, right now, I believe the elected town clerk is a department head, and then there are department heads that are under the jurisdiction of other elected boards, for example, the Municipal Light Board or the Board of Health, for example. So this says appoint and remove all of these non-elected department heads, subject to the select board approval. And we talked a little bit about the various types of approvals that can be granted by the select board and timings of those. And I don't think we're going to go into those a little bit more. We decided, we committed to at least giving you some language for each option, and you could look at that. But I think the most important thing is who is going to be exempt from this? If you look in your bylaws, do not give the town manager the authority to appoint all department heads, even non-elected department heads. I don't believe your two chiefs, your police and fire chiefs, are in the bylaws for that. Now, we're not talking about the bylaws here, we're talking about prospective charter. So I think that's something that the committee needs to discuss. And then the other thing is, to what extent will the town manager have over any department heads or employees of elected bodies? And we're talking here about, the town, the assessors, the light department, the planning board, park and rec, and so on. Now, right now, we have found a number of informal memorandum of agreements that these bodies have negotiated between, usually the select board and the town administrator will negotiate these. And typically they talk about how the town manager will supervise and be involved in the administration, but typically does not give the town manager in these memorandum of agreements any authority to appoint or remove department heads or other employees within that department. So I think we should talk a little bit more about this and see if the committee has any questions or want to expand because this language right here would be all department heads that are not elected, and so that would include the police and fire chiefs, at least in the current language as it's situated. That is not the case in your bylaws.
Can I ask a question? What are the pros and cons of having the police and fire chiefs appointable by the select board versus the town manager?
Well, there are two departments that are public safety related. They're very important departments, obviously. But I would say that in communities that have charters, it's typical that the chief administrative officer will be responsible for all department heads, subject to select board approval and oversight. But I don't know. That's a good question, and it may exist. It may be an historical reason. It may be something else, and I think that's something that your committee might want to probe.
But what you're saying, though, is that this is not typical of other towns.
To exempt certain appointed department heads, correct.
Yeah, and those particular, too. Also, just to clarify something, there was some discussion last time about the police and what the strong police chief and hiring and appointing. We're trying to find the statutes where it actually spells that out. The assumption is they're still just coming with one, the select board doesn't interview anymore, but whether that's a formality that they're appointing them, or whether that's a statutory thing that they have the right to say no, we're looking to find the actual statutes where it says it, because we don't have it yet. Just so you know.
Yeah, I haven't found anything either.
Okay.
So I guess the question here, police and fire chief, and then the elected boards, to what extent, Now, in this, the second part of this D, section D, talks about, wait a second now, okay, I'm looking for employees now.
And to approve, it's the first sentence, and removal of all other town employees.
Yes, and so now that's another issue. What I think we should do, and I made a note of this, we are going to probably change this to say approve the department head's appointment. Because that is what we are looking at here. We think the department heads should be making appointments to their various staff, and it should be subject to approval of the town manager in this case. Now, if there's any department, employees that, should be appointed by the select board directly, then that's an issue. I think we talked a little bit about town council. That the town council really isn't a department head, it's not staff, so we have to figure that one out. But in all cases, it's the department heads really that are appointing or hiring the people within their department, and it's just approved. And we assume the approval will be just, did the department head, follow the system? Is there anything, they're not changing or questioning the judgment of the department head. So I think it's a fairly routine appointment.
This is pretty much where we are now, though, right, with the non-elected people?
I think so. It's not totally clear because it's not written out in your bylaws, but I
Yeah.
believe that is the case.
Is that how you guys understand it? They've been around a while? I mean, basically, the department heads hire and fire people, but the town administrator can step in, right?
Correct, correct.
Or the
yeah.
select board, like who do they?
No, they're not
report
supposed to be in the day-to-day anymore.
Well, they do their own recruiting and interviewing, and then they
The
would bring a person to the town manager or administrator and say, we want to appoint so-and-so as the planning
Right.
assistant, and then
Right.
they
So
would approve.
That's what I would
it.
expect, but what you're saying is,
Well, I'm asking because the question is it the select board or the town manager that approves it? So currently, if this is a new step that the town manager would approve, does that mean the select board currently approves?
I don't think they do. No, not for just that's what I was saying, for the non-elected department people, that's handled within the departments, I think, pretty much within the town.
And then the department heads are appointed by the select board? And managed
Yeah.
by the administrator?
Yes, department head, well, but who, so the
The
town
current
administrators
bylaw
is,
says department head shall be appointed by and can be removed by the town administrator, subject to the approval of the select board.
Ah, okay. So that
And we'd be
is
looking to keep,
the same.
that would be the same, so you would have department
But is
head
that-
appointed by town manager, approved by select board, and then department employees appointed by town manager, appointed by the board, the head of the department, and approved by the town manager. It was sort of a
so
flow.
let's
Well,
take an example. What's
they-
one, go ahead.
They can't appoint subject to, they have to nominate and the board approves.
For the elected boards,
No, for the non-elected boards.
non-elected boards.
No, he doesn't, if the select board has to approve, then he cannot hire them. He nominates,
Okay, but let's put down a specific example. Let's talk about this board or that board. And not that we're picking on anybody, but just, here's an elected board and a non-elected board, and talk about how the process is.
Do we have a marker over there on the whiteboard?
That's a good idea.
No.
It was a good idea.
I didn't know we were talking about boards and committees yet. So
Well,
well, we're talking about who can
So
appoint and who cannot.
I'm just getting confused because we were talking about appointment of employees of the town. And I don't know what it is right now, but right now the proposition is in this draft charter that the town administrator or manager would have the ability to appoint or hire or select, subject to select board approval. That's the proposition on the table, is that right?
Yes, and we're
That's
just trying to
correct.
confirm, is that
Correct. Giving an
current practice,
example.
or is it different?
Yeah. So what would be an example of a department head in Littleton that is non-elected?
That is not elected?
Department of Public Works.
A
There's numerous.
non-elected.
Yeah, numerous,
Okay,
Public Works.
Yeah, okay, so Public Works, we could take as an example.
Yeah, so
Just to
Steve
work
Steve
something.
Yonley, theoretically, if his position opened up, we're saying TA or TM would be the
Appointing
one that
Yeah.
comes to the select board and says, I propose that, and then select board blesses it. He doesn't have independent authority unique to himself. He has to go to select board to say, I bring you this candidate who I vetted, and some of you probably participated in an interview process, and now take action to accept the recommendation or refuse the recommendation. I think that's I think we think that's the normal situation that
That's the way it's
exists
handled right
today.
now.
Yeah,
And then, under that department, the department head has the ability to hire and fire
below,
in discipline.
Yeah.
So we don't want to get that confused.
and I agree, yeah. I think that's the way we think that works right now.
And does the town manager, if that department head is hiring and firing, is there any current mechanism where the town manager says yay or nay to that? Or is it completely removed right now from town manager involvement?
Well,
I think it's completely removed.
They have a role in the disciplinary process, don't they?
Yeah, they should.
The administrator is administering the personnel system.
Yeah, the personnel
townwide.
system says certain steps have to be taken in discipline, so he would have a role in that.
Yeah.
Well, it's in, the wording here is that the town manager shall consult with the elected board, well, it's elected.
Yeah. This is where we get confused last week, when we started.
Oh, you were gonna switch this to make it two different paragraphs. That was Kevin's thing too, is this thing.
Because you
split up?
have non-elected and
Right.
elected.
Right.
Wait, is it split up on here now, or is it still just one?
No, there's no changes.
Yeah, it's the
That's
same
We
draft.
have that notation, and we're gonna
Okay.
consider that.
This is
I
what
think
kept
that,
getting messed up.
I think what that we're talking about here is the employees of those other departments. I don't know if town's ready to give the town manager, or the town administrator, the authority over certain elected bodies, like I think you said the municipal light department and the water department in particular are pretty exclusive. So I think what we're really talking about is what about the employees? You know, does the town manager have any authority to kind of look over how an employee was hired and check that off for elected boards? And we can write that better, but I guess the question is that something that you want to extend the town manager's authority into, or at least give the town manager some?
Like have a
some
veto
guidance?
power, like a veto power, right? Like, well, I worked with them in another town, and no, I say no, I know something about them or whatever, I don't know.
well, I'm challenged because I didn't know we were gonna be doing, I think this is getting to a pretty deep dive with regard to the various MOUs. And because there are numerous MOUs, as we've discussed previously, that exist. And my reading of those MOUs is that the select board negotiated with, in some cases, an elected board or committee. And that board or committee gave up their authority for supervision to the TA.
Exactly.
And as a result of that, one would think that the supervisory capacity deals a great deal with regard to the ability to effectively influence, shape their actions, and thereby the actions of all the people that report to that department head. But I find myself not knowing with clarity as to the 7 or 8 MOUs that exist right now, and what do those existing MOUs state with regard to supervision, suspension, does it include termination or recommendation of termination? And I think my gut is that they probably have nuances between them with regard to, they're not all written the exact same way. So
So-
that concerns me that,
They're not written
I would say a couple of things, though. Number one is we're talking here, first, we want to take out the elected ones and do the other boards, and so I don't think the MOUs apply to those, right? And just to start, and then number two, I somewhat agree with you, but then there's some extent, at the first level, it's like, how do we want it to work? Not how does it work today? We have to some
Start from
understanding, but there's nuances, but okay, so there's nuances between this, but how should it work? How do we think it should work?
well, let me just push
Okay,
in
yeah,
the
no,
spirit
go
of
for it.
advancing the conversation. If there's an elected board or committee, which
Yeah.
we have, like Mel mentioned, light and water.
Yeah,
I'm of the opinion, don't touch that department head responsibility. Don't change, actually, that even elected concept. But there's others that aren't quite the same, I guess. The
Wait.
water and light has
Yeah.
a general manager that is a well-compensated individual, very professional. Hard to imagine a comparable contemporary that wouldn't be that general manager, position. Or it would be so inefficient that I would argue, why would we want to propose that type of professional to be hired in two places to give oversight? That to me is redundant and too expensive. Having said that, there are a number of other elected groups. I'll just,
Okay, but not to stop, but
Non-elected.
we're trying to talk about the non-elected first, because we know the elected is going to be a whole nother discussion. So
So
let's talk about the
non-
non-elected first.
non-elected boards and committees?
Yeah, just
Or
the
non-elected department?
just the non-elected department heads. Yeah, let's just get through that one first. How should that work?
What other, is the library trustee a non-elected? Is Sam elected or is he not elected? I don't even know that
He's
we.
appointed
He's
by an
appointed
elected
by the
board.
Board of
Okay,
Trustees.
but we're not, right now, we're talking about the other, the boards like Public Works, we just talked about.
Well, Public Works not elected.
Right. So let's just talk about that
Just-
first.
just
and
stick
then-
with that group.
I mean, am I missing, is that where we were going or not?
We're talking about non-elected.
Right.
Non-elect, I think, yeah,
I'll go
it
back.
seems like it may be helpful to go one by one and just kind of understand.
That's why I was hoping we could.
Because the elected's a
write it
whole
out.
nother, I
know,
agree,
yeah.
a whole nother thing, but
There aren't many elected.
No.
There are
there are a
very
lot of
few.
elected boards.
Correct, but that's what you're
Department
saying,
heads,
that's
you
where I
mean.
was trying to move you.
We're
But
just trying
not-
to
If we're just
carve
talking
it out
about,
a little
if we're
bit.
just talking about elected department heads,
Non-elected.
Non-elected
Non-elected.
department heads.
If I may.
non-elected department heads, there are many.
Yeah, we're
Most
trying
of
to
them.
chip away at this.
Yeah.
So we're doing non-elected first.
So we've got Public Works. I guess my question is there some commonality with the non-elected department heads? Is it possible to lump them all together and say they're all the same? Or would you find that actually applying one rule to all of the non-elected department heads trips up at some point? Is there?
an org chart?
That would be lovely.
As imagined.
Because I feel like you could say, oh, we can apply this rule to all non-elected department heads is X, but then there's this exception, and then there's this exception.
If we start making corner cases for everything, we'll never get through it.
Exactly, yeah.
So my tendency is elected, non-elected, that's a big enough divide
start.
at the moment.
Yep.
And if you think of it, even just a company, I mean, ultimately, everybody reports up to the CEO. It doesn't matter if you're manufacturing or engineering or finance, you all report to the same person.
That's right.
So I don't think we need to chop it up too fine. I think if we can just talk about the non-elected groups as a whole, if there is some extreme corner case that somebody flags, like, okay, fine, we can talk about it, but at the moment, I think we just talk about them as a group.
Non-elected boards, Stu, are all appointed by the select board, right? Members of the board,
Yep. Currently, I think that's
Board
true.
of Appeals, or whatever it is, I mean, they're all appointed by the select board. Now, they're appointed by the select board, do we ever want to give the town manager the authority to take authority over the department head of that committee that's all completely appointed by the select board?
Well, under
But I
this
think that's what
language,
we're-
it would say that the town administrator will
Right.
appoint those, subject to the select board's approval.
Right.
Do you have an example, Bill, on that one?
Example of what?
Appointed board that has a department head?
We have the Board of Appeals, all appointed by the Board of
I don't
Select.
think Do they have staff?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, I don't think they do.
They have staff.
No.
No,
No.
So we're
Who does
only
the
really talking
assessor
about
report to?
department head.
The assessor is
Elected?
elected, but there is a board of assessors. Board of assessors are elected, the
The board's elected,
Depart-
the assessor.
department head, the assessor is
not.
appointed.
Yeah.
Actually, I take that back. The select board does have a memorandum agreement with the ZBA around the administrative assistant position. And
That's correct.
given the town administrator appointing authority. So, I think if they're elected or non-elected, even though they're an appointed board, I think it's still I agree that they should be lumped together as non-elected appointed board department heads.
Well, so let's play that out. Because Nick Lawler is not elected, are we actually saying we're for having Nick Lawler, be subject to the town manager proposed in the charter?
Certainly.
Not at all.
Department head like all others, except his span of control might be a little bit bigger.
You're talking about the thing
But
that.
it still has to-
You're talking about a fucking, light and water is completely different word.
So I disagree. I think I agree with you, if I'm understanding you correctly, but
Who's Nick?
Nick Lawler is the general manager of the light and water department.
Oh, yeah, I was thinking DPW, I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah, Steve Yonley, I would agree with you, Alan. Agree
Sure.
100%. Nick Lawler, I would cut out and separate.
Yeah.
He might be a unique one. I'm okay with a strong fire chief and a strong police chief reporting to a town manager in a charter.
Why not light and water?
Light and water, there's a level of, each one, I don't want to be disrespectful, so they're each professionals of significant capacity,
Right.
but
And so are police, and so are fire, and
Light and water.
Like all
the
other
complexities
complexities,
was-
yeah, the
Yeah.
Line's
complexities.
really a different animal
But
because
just-
it's
so-
It
municipality.
was set up in 1913, it's been in existence, it's completely separately run, it's run by a professional, and you have a
Should
board
be
of
run by a
commissioners.
I mean,
Yeah, we hope there's lots of
But if you're
professionals
saying
in
that
this
they
town.
report to someone, and right now they report to the select board, right?
Who does?
Well,
The light
I thought they were
board, who are they
elected.
accountable
I thought they had
to?
elected
Nobody.
General manager.
They're accountable
Board.
to the commissioners and to the general manager.
But I mean, who's the general manager accountable to currently in the org chart?
the commissioner,
The
The
commissioners.
commissioner.
The elected, it's an elected body.
Yeah.
right,
They're
of which
elected.
Joe is one.
The whole conversation would be so much easier if we had
People here.
someone here
Right.
who, a selectman, for instance, and we had a table of organization.
Right.
yeah, that
Because
would,
we're-
that would
We need
really,
the org chart.
really.
We had to rely on, did I remember
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
we had this commission? I forgot about
We need the list of
that.
all the boards.
Well,
and
let
their
me,
statuses.
to Charlotte's point, make a point that, Joe, I hope you can help me kind of like where Ellen's going. My understanding is that the light department's budget is not part of the town meeting process, that is a unique, the water department is in it.
Correct.
But, and the sewer is in it, which isn't really the water, so maybe I'm wrong, but that is to differentiate, to Charlotte's point, what is a unique aspect of it. The entire light department is not, to the best of my knowledge, part of the town meeting process in which residents come and vote. That, to me, is a pretty significant differentiation point.
And the finances are all paid by the ratepayers.
Yeah, that's where the revenue.
I mean,
comes from.
effectively, I don't know if I'm using this term correctly, but it's sort of parastatal. It's a sort of separate
Yes,
parastatal entity.
yes.
So I think that, to me, seems like a more relevant argument for saying that it is an exemption versus maybe the technical management side of it, because I feel like that maybe gets us into murkier waters. But I think the fact that it's this completely separate
Yeah.
entity is
So that's why I
makes more
wanted to make that
sense
point,
it's-
because to your point with regard, that's how it's differentiated from the
Yep.
police chief and the fire
So
chief.
let's leave it separate and then talk about all the other
I'm
non-appointed,
good with that.
non-elected,
Yep.
and then we can come back.
And are there any other weird exceptions?
Tim,
Let's
can you
let's
tell-
stop there.
I think everything else ultimately goes through a
It's the
town
same.
meeting.
No, I think you're right about the light department, the employees, well, Joe, you could tell us, I mean, they have their own pay scale, they have their own personnel policies, it's almost as if it were a private utility. It's just, it happens to be public, but I mean, it's a
Right.
corporation
That's a good
unto
way
itself.
That's a good way to think of it.
Yeah.
They serve exclusively the town of Littleton.
That's
and
their client,
Roxborough,
yeah.
Whatever, but.
But they have their own, they run their own operation fiscally, and
Operation and
British Rail.
They have to control the water quality, the quantity, where it comes
Yeah.
from. It's all separate.
Okay, so let's take them off the table.
Okay, and then the rest of the
they're
same.
not typical, so.
Are there any others?
Yes, I think there are. And I think they're covered, we did some research on the memorandum of agreements, and we found some positions. I don't know if they're considered department heads or not, but one's called the administrative assistant for the ZBA. Another one is called with planning board, called the
So that's Mary.
planning administrator / permit coordinator.
The
Another one
planning
is,
board's appointed, Mel.
yeah, I
Planning
know.
board was elected.
Plan- Planning board is elected,
Oh, the
correct.
planning board's elected.
I'd say elected.
I'm
I'd say
sorry.
elected.
And the Parks and Rec are as well. There is a memorandum between the LCTV, but that's clearly in the bylaw, that's part of the town administrator's current.
Well, yeah, there's
And
an
then,
MOU
and
with
then
the
the Elder
LCTV.
Services, Elder and Human Service Director. If you notice in the bylaw, that gives the Council on Aging some authority. And in this language here, because they're an appointed board, it would not, there wouldn't be, as far as I know, any consultation necessarily. So that could be a unique one. And then the town council is one I think we should talk about also. It's not really a department head, but who should be appointing that?
I think the select board, I think.
What's that?
Town council should be appointed by the select board, because that person acts as the board's attorney
Right.
in most matters, or the board can delegate town council to other boards, but they should be the ones making the call as to who it is, I think. Yeah.
But the-
We'll put that in under the select board.
But are we saying that the rest of department heads should conceptually, for discussion purposes, be considered to be reporting to the town manager?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we start with that, and
Yeah.
then we go through the
That's the
process, right?
default.
That's the
Okay.
default, yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, that's good. And then, if you want to talk about the elected bodies, I started to talk about some of those elected bodies that have directors, departments that are subject to the memorandum. And frankly, most of the memorandum says, town manager can have daily supervision, but we're going to retain approval, appointment, and removal authority. So,
No, am I wrong in thinking that once we set to writing what we think should be in a town charter, that these MOUs go away?
Yeah.
I would
Yeah,
think so,
okay,
yeah.
all right. We're treating them as if
No,
they're
it's just-
scripture or
Yeah,
something.
no, that's what I'm
No,
saying.
but I just
Let's
want
just say
you
this
to
is how we
know
think
what
it should be, and then we'll have to
So,
probably
So for
negotiate.
example, when the
Okay.
bylaws or the memorandum say that, the town manager, should be talking to the appointed board or the elected board.
Yeah.
And I just want you to know that that exists now, and if you change that, you're making a change that you need to acknowledge.
But continuing that thought, I would argue that as I think we're considering this town manager, we're looking for efficiency, accountability, number of other words. If we don't take the next step to sever and give that town manager the authority to propose changes, if that town manager has to convince a unique board or committee, independent of committing the select board, now we've got this MOUs, and now we're embracing it within the charter and setting up, if you've got if a department head knows, well, I may have a problem with you, my boss, from a supervision standpoint, but I'm still gonna be here because I speak to a board or committee, and you're not gonna get the votes in order to do it, then we're undercutting the
You're right.
whole concept of accountability and efficiency. Or I'd make an argument that we're somewhat going through a motion
I think
that
that's what the second part of that first sentence in D is saying, is that the TM has also the ability to approve and remove all other town employees.
But in this discussion, Betsy, I think, was the person that said, think about it the way it should be as opposed to how it is. I'm trying to bring up the point, as I think Mel said, that some of the existing MOUs still give the board or committee the ability to do the removal, aspect, as opposed to the town manager having that. And so you're pointing out that the language would now
Make those.
give
My
that
understanding
switch.
was, if this charter is ratified, then those MOUs go away. They are meaningless.
Oh, I understand that, but I'm just saying, then we need to recognize that with that going away, we are taking from the board or committee that currently has an MOU that says we decide who is dismissed, and now it's the town manager who
Right.
makes that decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's an important distinction, one that I'm sure we're gonna need to, have some consideration with the existing boards and committees.
Totally, I mean,
For
this
sure.
is not the kind of thing I think we're gonna sit around and say, this is how it should be, and then we move on. I mean, this is the first step, you put the line in the sand, and now we're gonna be hearing from people, and we should be hearing from them and asking for them, and there'll be a lot more discussions, but you
Correct.
gotta start someplace.
Oh,
You put the
Right.
line in the sand, you
Sure.
say, this is what we're proposing, tell us why we're wrong.
But we should
Why it won't
understand how it's a
Oh, you're
change
right,
from where
right,
we
no,
exist
no,
today.
I think, yeah, I agree.
In the final analysis, what we write and what town meeting approves
Right.
is what it'll be, and those MOUs will be gone.
Yeah.
So,
So for the sake of the notes here, I think at least right now, it seems like the committee is leaning towards this idea that the strong town manager would assume those
Yes.
responsibilities from what
Yes.
was board and committee responsibilities in the MOUs, and it would go to town manager.
those MOUs came into being under a former TA, and they were done not because he was gathering unto himself, but it became obvious from some of the boards and commissions that they could not, as civilian appointee board members or elected, supervise the people that worked for them.
Right.
So they made the MOUs, set it up so that he could supervise the department heads and do the nitty-gritty, day-to-day work, and that's how they came about. If we do this right, there'll be no need for any of those things, so.
So Betsy, I'd like to point out that I think in Charlotte's, I don't know what we call the document that you
The
put
tracker.
together, the tracker.
For want of a better word.
I think that some of us are identifying, it would be nice to have an org chart. I think a task that we're going to have to deal with prior to going to public hearing or proposals is going to be an org chart that this is how it exists with these. We can determine which of those specific responsibilities are worthy of noting as pretty powerful responsibilities and abilities, and how we're proposing it to be changed. I don't see how we're gonna, we're handicapped by not having it today.
I've
We
asked,
can't
I'll
expect-
tell you, I have asked.
Correct. I
have asked.
But it's not here, and we just have to, we're gonna
Make our
have to
own.
have that, correct? Or else we have to task
Yeah.
somebody and
Right,
make
or we
it our
have to
own.
do it ourselves,
I
and then
think,
have somebody say, is this right or wrong? Right.
I mean, thinking way back, I mean, the org chart that ever existed once upon a time, it's like a mile wide and an inch deep.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah, yeah.
every department is its own fiefdom,
Yeah,
you know?
right,
So
right,
it's all decentralized, and that's kind of
Yeah,
what we're working
Well, at least we can,
against now.
we can identify
Who's who.
who's who.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
and you can just, yeah, and have right in front of you a list of what all those boards are and which ones
Yeah,
are.
right now, we're just relying
Yeah, they
on
can start
the
to move
memories
the
around the room.
pieces, yeah.
Oh, there's this and there's
Right.
that.
Right, so it's okay, so we can continue this, still in terms of philosophically how we should go, we know we have a lot more nits and gnats and detail work to work through. This is just getting us started on where we're headed, go
Yeah.
through it that way, right? Okay,
Can I just chime in real quick?
absolutely.
If the org chart doesn't exist, I would be happy to work with somebody or
Okay.
multiple people to help.
Okay, I
Define
found,
it.
I got one that was done several years ago for Cindy Napoli, I think it was, but it's not accurate, I can tell you now.
Okay.
It may have been then, but I looked at, there were a couple things in it now, I said, well, that's just not, I know it's not.
It's a start, maybe, right?
But it's a starting
Yeah,
point, so,
exactly.
okay, all right,
Yeah.
thank you,
Exactly.
That's
you're
great.
on.
Can I ask one
Yes.
question, Madam Chair? The first line says, appoint and remove all non-elected department heads. Isn't really the town clerk the only elected department head? I mean, isn't that the only department head we're excluding with this sentence is the town clerk? Because she is
I think you're right.
currently an elected
Right?
and a department head, and I can't think of anyone else
All
in
the
that.
others are board members of,
Is the Board of the head of the Board of Assessors appointed by the assessors?
Yes.
The chief assessor is, yes, yeah, yeah.
Right.
So I think it's just.
So you might be right.
I think you're right.
Yeah. And if that were ever to change, then there would be none, but yeah, I think it's just the clerk. Okay.
Do we want to talk about that one in particular right now, or we'll just put that in general? I mean,
With the
it
town.
to change, and have the clerk be.
So elected.
I think,
Would that fall under the
But that-
elected?
This is the
bucket,
elected versus
though?
non-elected discussion,
Yeah.
not the other, never mind, all right,
Yeah,
let's
we
just let it go
would,
for
we
now.
have another section.
Yeah,
dealing
okay,
with
great,
elected
all right, let's go.
officials.
Good point. Okay, so
Well,
that's
this is
good.
very, very helpful. So why don't we move on? I think we've got some things to think about. Under E, I think somebody mentioned, well, do we want the town manager to be involved in any of the town committee appointment, board committee appointments? And while this doesn't necessarily do that here or specify it, it allows for it. So it allows the town manager to nominate for select board approval, appointment, or removal volunteer members of town boards and committees for whom another method of appointment is not provided for in this charter or bylaw. So we're gonna have to figure out who's gonna do it, and is there any boards, so for example, if you decide, the select board does it now, and we want the select board to do everything now, then, we're not talking about anything. But if there's any boards or committees that, that think that it might be more efficient for the town manager to nominate rather than the select board to sit at the meeting and interview people and, take 2 meetings to do it, then here's where it happens. Now, you don't have to decide now. It's just here. It's a placeholder, basically, to allow the town manager to have some of those appointments.
It's another place where we just need to lead a list of the board and look at them, because some of them
That's right.
probably
And
say
we
there's
have
no way the
that.
select board should be spending their time on that, and other ones, right?
exactly.
And
So
then
maybe
we
they
have
would
a whole
retain a
other
couple
section about
perhaps, or.
We need a list,
appointed
Yeah.
boards, so we can talk about
need a
that
list of all
later.
the boards.
Well,
Under
before we
F,
just,
Okay, go ahead.
before we go there,
Yes,
I mean, there was in the first half of this year, a disability commission, and my words, not theirs, out of frustration with the absence of one of their members, they finally got around to presenting to the select board, we want this person removed in order to allow us to do our work, because we're having quorum problems, et cetera. And so I raised that by way of, is the town manager, if all of a sudden given by us all of these appointments for removal and, appointment, do they have capacity? Like, we have, how many? 20, 30 of these? It gets to me that we better be downsizing and merging or modifying in some way, or else the task, I want this more powerful town manager to do a lot bigger things than all of a sudden dealing with 20 or 30 who's where and are they there and that type of stuff. That's the point I want to make.
So who else would do,
I think, but
who else would do, go ahead.
the last part of the sentence in E is basically saying, yeah, the town manager can do this as long as there's not another method provided in a charter or bylaw. So if it's already written
So
out.
it already exists somewhere else, so allow them to do their thing and that
That's how I
person stepped
interpret
in.
this.
Okay, but I still kind of think, will they really have a reach and a vision to even know whether this problem exists? That's the point. Don't need to belabor it. You're making a very good point that it's not removing it from that group that should have their attention focused on their inability to do things.
But if the alternative is the select board does it versus the
Yeah.
town
Yeah,
manager,
which is
then
also a
that, the
bad.
town manager's
that's a-
basically doing it anyway to get it to the select board, right? So,
Seemingly.
right.
And there's always the assistant town manager.
Well,
Growth opportunity.
Okay, so it's a good point, though.
It
There
is.
are a lot of people in that, so.
Well, and this came up just at the last select board meeting, which I kind of want to throw to you folks, but also to potentially Mel and Anthony. There was discussion at the select board meeting recently that if a vacancy exists in a 7-person body, and the vacancies are such that the majority becomes, is it a majority 4 out of 7? Or in the absence of, in the existence of a vacancy, is it strictly the majority of the existing filled seats, if you will. And Matthew Nordhaus read Mass General Law that is, no, you could theoretically, because of vacancies, have the inability to have a quorum because you don't have a proper majority. So my question is, can we, in a charter, because charter is a special act, can we override that with language that would be majority rules independent of vacancies? Like if you come down, because we're starting to have ongoing vacancies and that's where it came up, was FinCom. Of all the groups that need to have the ability to operate, FinCom's certainly one of them, that we can't go without it. And they were almost in the point of a FinCom meeting that wasn't gonna have a quorum, in part because they hadn't taken action to welcome the most recent elected person. So
Shall I jot
we
that
can
down
defer
as
that.
something for
If-
boards
if
and
that could be
committees, perhaps?
determined at some date whether we got the ability, and that kind of goes to where I'm at. Seemingly, we don't even know some important things that are kind of gumming up the works. But can move on. I'd like it to determine whether we can deal with that issue.
I think that has to deal with what constitutes a quorum of a public body. And I'm sure the general laws would overrule anything we might
Right.
think of. You know, we can't just say it's a majority of whoever shows up, or,
Yeah.
you know, it's a quorum of
It's a-
7 members, there's 4. If you don't have 4, you don't have a meeting. You
Right.
can't do any business.
Suppose
Yeah,
the
so
other
that would
side,
run against the open meeting law, which does, specifically to have some definitions for quorum. And, again, you're in a special act, so you're right there. Yeah, I think would cause some real issues if you go to the state legislature. When those issues arise, I'm not sure, I think you were talking about the finance committee, which we're gonna discuss, it's later on in the charter. I mean, those are important ideas in terms of how do we structure this body? How is it being appointed? Like, rather than redefining the quorum, maybe redefining the size of
Okay.
the body would be really the best way to address those types of issues.
And that's fine. I'm just saying, I think we need to give consideration to how to address some of the issues that may be emerging periodically.
okay, yep. But I think I do like that, adjusting the size, because I can see some, again, if you play devil's advocate on some of the stuff and some of the stuff that goes on, so we got everybody that agrees with us on our committee, we don't really want to fill those other 2 positions because, right?
Right, yeah.
We
right.
That's what we want and the way
Got
the way it
rid of
is.
the People we wanted to.
So, all right, that's a good discussion though, because you got to look at these things from every angle. That's what it's all about. All right, so where are we? Go ahead, Mel. Trying to keep us on track
I
here.
think we'll look at E and F. E and F are the town manager's authority to administer personnel policies. E relates to, F is.
F and G,
F,
yeah.
yeah, F and G, I'm sorry. F relates to compensation, and G, it relates to administer personnel policies. Now, you'll remember that back in the select board section, the select board is responsible for adopting a personnel system which incorporates all of these elements, and it's the town manager's responsibility for administering them. I will tell you that in your bylaws, you do have a section, I think it relates in the personnel part of your bylaw that says the municipal light department and water department are exempt from this, I believe it's section 33(6) of your bylaws. It exempts the school department, light and water departments from those. And so we would probably want to say those things,
Yeah.
in the charter if that's what the committee wanted.
I agree.
Agreed. Hear any arguments on that one? Thank you for bringing that up.
Okay. And H related to that, it gives the town manager the authority to negotiate contracts with unions or employee organizations, and that requires the approval of the select board. And I think, as you know, it also, state law requires town meeting, the legislative body, to adopt or approve these agreements to the extent that they cost money, which they all do. So I think this is pretty straightforward stuff right here. Under H.
How much is the select board really involved in the negotiations at this point or not? So much union negotiations that we have in town?
They used to be when I was
I
there.
know,
I don't
I
know.
didn't know if they still are, or whether it's pretty much not taken out of that now. Jim, you think it's pretty much Jim?
I think it is.
And maybe Labor Council. if-
Yeah, okay. Okay, I would think that, but at this
They
point, I
have-
don't know.
Executive
Yeah, I mean,
sessions
it
to
wouldn't,
discuss
it
bargaining,
wouldn't,
so
Right,
they are involved.
right, but,
But at a
But
high
whether
level,
involved in
And then-
nitty-gritty is
yeah,
something
are they
else.
in the meetings, or are they just, yeah, okay. Okay, all right,
all right, okay, so I is obviously a huge section, but let's understand that we're having a whole nother section of this charter dealing with the budget and finances. So I simply states that the town manager is responsible for preparing and presenting an annual operating budget and a capital improvement plan, a 5-year plan. And then pursuant to Article X, which, you know, we're gonna go into a lot more detail. But I think it's very important that, because currently, you know, your bylaws really are very unclear about the town manager's responsibility for preparing and presenting the operating budget. So I think this is a really important statement, but again, the details are done in a later article.
there are some people who feel strong, I mean, that used to be, FinCom really did this. I mean, it used to be back in the day, FinCom like created the budget and all that, we didn't have a finance staff, so that there is a lot of, there are people that are uncomfortable with this. But I
Yeah.
think the reality is now, the way FinCom is working, is that this is what's happening anyway. It's the town staff, the financial staff that are doing it, with
There's a
FinCom,
finance
clearly
director,
with them
yeah.
involvement, FinCom involved and so on.
Yeah.
You
what
And
are,
I-
you agree?
Yeah, I like what I think Karen you said when we had this conversation last time, is if with this particular topic, mapping out that racy part of it,
Yeah.
because then it feels like the town manager does have maybe accountability overall, but someone else might be responsible for the detail, et cetera, and I think that might help us
They
to.
could delegate the preparation of the budget to the finance director under this as well,
Right.
I would think. It's
Right.
nominally under the town manager,
Right.
but
But I
he or
like the
she
idea
would
of
have the finance director do the number
buck
crunching.
stopping somewhere, right?
Right,
It's- yeah.
all right, and so when we get, though, to the Article X there, then we'll talk more about FinCom's involvement and what their role is and so on, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Do you have a capital planning committee?
No, it's part of the
The finance committee
finance
does
team and the
that.
FinCom, they do it
Okay.
together.
A lot of communities have that, so I don't recall seeing that. Okay. Number J, or letter J,
Yeah.
is the procurement. You know, the state has a very aggressive procurement law that requires every town to have a chief procurement officer, and the chief procurement officer, you know, could delegate to other, smaller departments if they wanted to buy smaller items. But bottom line is, we want the town manager to be designated in this position, and it does say in the last sentence, including the authority to appoint such assistant procurement officers as the law provides. So I guess the question here is, do you want to have other, school departments clearly exempt from this, they have their own chief procurement officer, but other town departments, if you want to continue to, keep the water and light separate, we'd probably want to say that here as well.
Yep, I think so at this point.
Yeah.
That's where we are.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep, that's what we're
All right.
doing now anyway, so.
Yeah.
K is inspect and sign payroll and expense warrants for payment. That's a really administrative task. Currently, I assume the select board does that, but they have to all be there and sign them.
Majority. It's hard when we have a week where there's no meeting, and you've got to get a majority of the board to
Right,
sign the
right,
warrant.
right.
They've got to come in
Right.
and sign it, and, yeah,
Right.
Yeah, I think it,
But it's,
ridiculous, kind of.
yeah.
And they know who worked that week, right? And how many hours they put in, right?
Can I go back to can I go back to Jay for a minute?
Yes.
So the town manager would have authority to approve any and all contracts entered into by the town without limit, without any approval by the select board?
it says for services and supplies.
Yeah, yes, unless, your town meeting appropriated money and with a specific provision that, someone, the select board or whatever has to approve the contract, I believe so, yes. So we're talking about, sand and salt in the wintertime and administrative expenses, IT contracts, there's a lot here. Vehicles, trucks, rolling stock, and there's just, a large amount of expenses that are approved every year.
So should we differentiate then, and you use the word administrative services, should we insert that to differentiate from, say, professional services that get into engineering design elements that can be $100,000 relatively easy?
You could do that. I personally wouldn't identify the specific nature of the services, but if you wanted to put a dollar amount.
Services and supplies identifies what we would want to have. The other stuff is, if it's not services and supplies, it probably does
Public
get
construction.
overlooked by the select board.
Yeah,
But
Right.
how do we prevent the confusion?
maybe that's intentional, right.
Is a new fire truck a supply?
That's gotta be capital.
That's town meeting.
Capital
I was
item.
gonna say, it's a budget, so that's the thing, is what falls in here versus something that's
Yeah.
it's in the town.
Well,
it's in the budget.
I think it is probably, rolling stock like a fire engine, although, fire engines are such expensive piece of equipment. But I think that's intended to include those. What I'm not clear about, and I'll have to look into, is what about the contract for construction? So you're building a new school or a new
That's-
fire station or have you, and, are these part of that?
A new IT system?
Yeah.
Townwide?
The
Yeah,
service?
well, if you're having these questions, then we're probably gonna have to define it better. The intent, I think, here is to be expansive and include
Take it away from the.
almost all expenditures of town
Yeah,
departments.
we need better, for example, 37 Shattuck Street that got soundly defeated in the last town meeting. We wouldn't have wanted the TA or a TM to have gone forward with a substantial expenditure for some design element pursuing some aspect that was at its heart the core of 37 Shattuck Street.
But I think that's outside of this, as I
That's
read it.
outside
Yeah.
supplies and.
Supplies and services. It's
Well,
not,
that's the word services.
Well, do you want to say non-capital? Because an IT system could be capitalized if it's
Well,
expensive
like,
enough.
there's also a distinction between, going through this procurement process and the budgeting, right?
fine.
Having something come before the town meeting to say, we want to allocate funds towards doing something. And then the administrative task of procuring the services and or materials you need to then, expend the funds. So I'm just saying, don't sort of conflate those two things.
Yeah, generally, all these things, supplies and services, is expending the money already approved in the budget for the year. Any other thing comes up, it's big bucks, and it all ends up going next year
Town
to
meeting.
town meeting.
Right.
And they make the decision, not the TA or TM. So I think we're
Right.
getting into the weeds too,
Yeah, we don't need to
get
at
that
this
kind of
point, but,
detail.
Yeah.
because there'll be exception after exception after exception.
Yeah, I think it's executing the contracts, and so, as opposed to approving expenditures, it's not, like I said, that happens at town meeting, right? It has to be in the budget first.
Yes.
Once it's in the budget, then it's,
So I wonder if the distinction here is also designing the contracts versus executing the contracts. So I think if you're saying that there are some things that have technical specificity that you'd want input in for the contract to be, contracting the right person, the right provider, or the right service, to me, this reads as just executing the contract.
But that's part of what the procurement officer does. They develop the specifications,
Develop the specs.
before it's advertised and before you get
So we're saying that
responses and.
the
decide
town
on-
manager would be responsible for developing the
But this all
specifications
happens
and.
after town meeting approves the money.
Right. I can see where that could get tangled up if you're saying you've approved
Yeah.
$100 for something. The town manager's responsible for developing the specifications, and if those are deemed wrong by anybody, or there's debate about that, or they haven't consulted with any, like, where do we want to add some sort of mechanism that the town manager would have support in that, or you just kind of make up the specs and off you go? I mean, I'm just being a little flippant, but like thinking about like how that could be interpreted.
But if the
Well,
alternative
that's
is.
a good point, Charlotte. You know, let's say the fire chief, the town meeting said, we're gonna buy the new ladder truck next year. And, you wouldn't want your town manager to be procuring, specifying all the details. That's a very technical thing that needs to be done. I'm not so sure we need to say that, but I think it's assumed that, that the town manager is not going to be designing the procurement vehicles for all these things.
Can I ask, I think you've given notice to Jim Duggan to come.
Next week, or next meeting.
Perhaps that could be a question of how are you going to differentiate your potential, abilities to sign contracts to do what inherently we differentiate between town meeting authorization versus a TA authorization. Are the words, is that understood adequately so that there's no question, or should clarity be brought to it?
Yeah, I mean, some of it's not town meeting versus here, it's the select board do it, or does the town manager do it? I
Well,
mean, this
I'm
is
just-
really what we're
I'm
coming
just-
down to on most of these
Right,
things,
I'm
right?
saying, is it known and understood, and where are the words that allow you to know and understand it? I feel like we're comfortable with our understanding of it, I'm not sure the words convey that.
And maybe also asking him if you were faced with having to execute a contract that is requiring technical specifications, like what's the current practice for that? Like what works, maybe? Do you consult with the relevant department? I'm presuming yes.
He's gonna say, yeah,
Yes,
that's the
but
job,
then maybe
right,
that
is
might
doing
be
it, right.
something
How do you
that you
spell
would
that
want to
out?
add, like the chief
Well, that could
procurement
get into
officer.
that whole matrix again, responsible, accountable.
Yeah.
I really think.
In
we
consultation
need to
with-
do
But
that.
you also then have to specify for which contracts, because a lot of these contracts are little things that you
Well,
just
we
want
can
to be
just
able to
say-
just do, right?
Yeah.
You could do it very simply.
Copy
If
paper.
you think town manager's responsible,
Speaking of which, you
accountable,
want to stay and answer some questions, or you want to wait till next time?
man of the hour.
Oh, he's
And
brave.
consulted
home
is the
if I were you.
department.
Careful.
head.
I feel bad you couldn't escape through the back door.
Yeah, bad choice.
give it a shot.
This is actually a fairly easy one. It's not political one. I don't think it is anyway. So we're talking about chief procurement officer.
Yep.
So, say you're the chief procurement officer now, you're the town manager, you're the Stronga town manager, you're the chief procurement officer. So it says you have the right to execute all the contracts.
Yep.
We need a new fire truck. What happens? You gonna go out and get a bid and do it yourself?
Nope. I can designate, I can have someone on staff be an MCPPO, but ultimately I will sign, the town manager would sign the contracts. He or she would sign purchase orders, contracts, you name it.
So is anything spelled out about which ones you can just, here, sign it, go, move on, versus having to involve other people? How does that?
I
Is
guess
that
for an MCP, for the procurement, well, there are procurement laws you have to follow, and your MCPPO.
So what is that, MCCPO?
Very good question, I apologize.
Sorry, yeah. okay.
Massachusetts.
Well, yeah, I don't care about that, but what is it regardless
Public
of the?
procurement officer.
Okay,
So municipal, public procurement officer.
okay.
But it's through the IG's office, you get that certification. And you have to go through a 3-tier testing of levels. You do goods and services, you do contracts, you do large school projects. Every layer gets harder.
Okay.
So at the end of it, you are an MCPPO, you're certified to do it. I have gone the first tier. Time-wise, I haven't gone in tiers 2 and 3. And I really didn't feel the need because Ryan's an MCPPO.
Okay.
Okay, he's got that certification. We have one person that just got it Kim Couveau in the treasurer's office. She declared her as the assistant finance director. And we also have, for checks and balances, we also have a girl that's gonna be starting the process. I'm sorry, thank you.
Sorry.
Well,
One of my
no,
things.
No, I appreciate that correction. I mean, she's so young.
I know, but.
Can't do that either. Age.
And it's something that she's going to be attending the next round of classes, which will start in the summer. And fortunately, it's $750 a course. The IG is providing free of charge for the town of Littleton. Right. And that's nothing on me, it's really something that his office has reached out to every community and say, if you need the financial assistance, we will waive the fees. And I said, gee whiz, our MCPPO went to another community, so he said, sure. I'll
Okay,
grant
so
it again.
that's part of the town manager's job, is to say, we make sure we have one of these people on staff. This isn't something you would contract out, it really needs to be somebody who works for the
Correct.
town.
Exactly, and, or, in some cases, it is the town manager, the town administrator, or something like that, the city manager, but in all likelihood, communities will have a separate person.
Okay, I think that addresses.
And the
Go ahead.
MCPPO would be the one, for instance, gathering specifications and the appropriate kind of parameters of that contract and checking all the boxes, crossing the Ts. They would be responsible for that piece.
That is correct. They were making sure that they get the Davis-Bacon, the federal wage rates that are involved in an RFP process. You have to include those in there. If you want to turn around and build a barn, and because it's going to go over certain financial investment, you also have to go, what triggers is Davis-Bacon wage rates and state prevailing wages.
And
So-
they know all that.
And then that has to be monitored also, but that is usually, that's done by the project manager, not by the MCPPO. He or she will get the records, but they won't be going out and saying, let me see your payroll records.
Tim?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask Jim. I mean, the example of like a fire engine, I mean, realistically, the chief's gonna come to you with 3 or 4 packages that other communities have bought fire trucks last year used, and that's what we're gonna use to, I mean, we're not all building a fire truck from the ground up. We're, if it's a known product that many communities are looking for,
Right.
the specs kind of come together.
They will, but you're exactly right. You're exactly right, Tim. However, there are certain communities like certain specifics about their engines.
No.
They like certain things, so they like this bell instead of that whistle, or this instead of that. So
Yeah.
you would normally have either the chief would engage with support staff, with some of his or her leadership team. Did you see, I said his or her? His or her leadership team to engage about the investment of what do you want to see in our new engine. But you're right, Tim, it is,
Yeah.
you're not going to reinvent the wheel where you don't have to.
Right.
And sorry, one last clarification then. So the MCPPO would be liaising with, let's say, the fire chief to be inputting those nuances or those specifications and designing the contract accordingly.
Correct, and whatever the department head is doing some kind of a procurement, goods and services or capital equipment, in this case, it's capital equipment, whoever that department head would be coordinating with the MCPPO all the way through the project.
And if the truck came in 250,000 over budget, according to the specs, what then?
Well, then it's a matter of whether we would have the extra financial resources, but then you're looking at, okay, we gotta start peeling back the onion now a little bit, and maybe we can't have that bell and that whistle and that extra ladder, or whatever the case is, or those, we have to have, something else on it, so, to get it done.
What I'm getting at is, should any contract and be subject to review and approval by the select board?
Not from my experience. So because there is the checks and balances, on the town manager form of government, the select board's checks and balances is typically the town accountant. Or in a city, it's the city auditor. Here, right now, that is not the case. It's kind of checks and balances amongst ourselves, but this way, the town accountant will make sure that, along with town council, will make sure that the contract and everything is up to appropriate standards. And that is the normal process that would be adhered to about involving town council and a town accountant. The town accountant would confirm, A, that the money is there from what the CFO says, and B, that procurement laws were followed correctly. And the administration or the department head and the administration would look at town council to confirm, and then typically will just initial approved as to form.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
Madam Chair? Oh, if I may, just to Jim, sort of like another scenario that's can't come up before the committee is if, to the same question, if the contract or the service goes over budget, or, you're getting bills outside of the fiscal year, would it be the process that this would go before, you'd have to submit an article to the select board to appear on the town meeting to get the appropriate transfers to complete those financial obligations?
Yes, it would have to, it depends on the strength of the finance committee in a particular community. Here, we've got a very strong one. In other communities, they're advisory. And quite honestly, my opinion is I would not change what it is here today to make it advisory. But yes, first of all, there would be a, if you're looking at a fire truck, you're looking at a $1.6 million, $1.7 million purchase. Throughout the build process, there would be regular meetings, making sure things are on budget and things of that nature. But if there is a shortfall, you are right, Anthony, it would have to be presented well in advance to the select board and the finance committee and say, well, it looks like we're gonna be $100,000 short. So, and, we may have $800,000 left in the budget, however, numbers are coming in higher than we think. So if there's, and it could potentially eat a subsidy, or we would request a subsidy.
So how is this different from what we have today? The select board still signing contracts and not you?
No, they're very liberal in it's usually over a certain dollar amount.
Okay.
And still, they can authorize me through a vote of the select board to sign, like, recently I signed the paving contract for $526,000. But I'm allowed to do that independently up to a certain amount.
So this really isn't that much different from what we have today?
No.
I would kind of clarify.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, but yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
One more question for you.
Not a problem.
Is it possible, we're talking about different committees and how it's set up in the whole town.
Yes, sir.
Can somebody in your office, some office, have an organizational chart that would list every single committee, whether elected or appointed, and where it falls under anyone's jurisdiction? Because we start talking about things we don't know. I'm just looking for a chart that says, this is all the committees,
Yep.
and this is where it falls, they're elected, they're appointed, who appoints them, that type of thing. Some kind of chart that we can look at and say, maybe this should be changed, maybe that should be changed, maybe it should stay the exact same.
Yeah, there is, we have something, and it's like an organizational chart, and it's a little confusing, so I should, I'm being kind here. But we can absolutely, and I think that is part of the annual report that's on there. I could be wrong, but I'll look into it for the committee, and I'll circle back. Myself or Lisa will circle back with what we have.
Deeply appreciated.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I think a point also, from your perspective, if there are commingled personnel, how in a charter town manager, should it go forward, how would that be different with regard to, you use the town accountant with regard to checks and balances?
Right.
And so if there are things that we may think, possibly incorrectly, that they are under your office as the TA, if there
Yeah.
would be a change of a charter town manager to then be separate, hence these people now report to the select board independent of the town manager, that insight would be very helpful to us,
Yeah.
because I think right now, we are working, as
Right,
Joe was
right.
suggesting, with some set, and we're not really certain,
Right.
and yet a perspective coming from you or the
Okay.
select board as to how things would be different is an important perspective that we should be given.
Well, the main checks and balances, the main difference is really in the financial component of it. And that's where the town accountant will come in as a checks and balances. Yes, we are audited outside. Now, an outside auditor in any municipality will just basically look at, let a file cabinet and turn around and open it up and pick out one file here, one file there, random. Whereas if you have kind of an internal auditor, if you want to say, that goes through that process we talked about with procurement process, confirming the funds are there, that the transfer was done appropriately, and the vote is there with the select board. That's the financial checks and balances. The other component, the other areas, is really, there is not anyone else that will fall off, that will report to the select board other than that. Everyone else should be under the town manager position, and that's for operations and for accountability and deliverables and performance reviews on, it gives there's better clarity with, he or she would know who to report to, where their expectations are, and things of that nature, instead of reporting to other areas.
That includes discipline also, right?
Yes, sir, it does. Exactly. Exactly. I mean, for instance, right now, we are going through performance reviews for, the staff have done, the department heads have done their staff, and now I'm going through department heads. But as you all know, we do have boards and commissions that are elected and that are appointed, and they have staff that report to them. Well, who do I answer to? Do I answer to the town administrator? Do I answer to the board of commission? And there, I mean, from a professional perspective, you're looking at situations through a different lens than a person on a board or committee, is looking at it. So there's better conformity with identifying as one appointing authority.
Just for the org chart, Karen has volunteered to help work with that, so if Lisa has something, but I know it's not right, Karen has volunteered, sorry, but you did.
I did, but I was remaining silent, hoping it would happen.
Yeah.
But I can help if that's useful.
No, that's wonderful. Absolutely. And if there's anything, please, if there's anything, happy to help in any way.
That will be also very helpful for us in terms of going forward, to be able to say, if this is how things are now, and then this is how it looks before and after kind of stuff. But we actually need it to get through what we have to do here.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that, and I know we're not, and I don't know, and I know this conversation wasn't planned or anything like that, and, but there is a strong method that has time and time again proven successful outcomes in terms of in terms of the chain of command and things of that nature, all of which is adopted through town manager form of government.
Get into some more of that in a couple of weeks when he comes back. We'll let you get out of here now, unless there's something else.
No,
Quickly,
no.
Mike, thank you for stopping and answering, because that was helpful in terms of that one, in terms of getting us past that.
Okay.
But we'll get you more in a couple of weeks.
No, I look forward to it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you for all your time and your effort behind this. It's very important for the community.
Don't forget your stuff.
Thank you. I was kind of hoping it would disappear. So I would, can't do it at home tonight, so. All right. Have a super
Thank you.
night.
Thank you.
So as far as that RACI chart that we were talking about for the procurement, responsible would be the PPO, the procurement officer, accountables, the town manager, consultant is the department head. And then informed is whoever. I mean, it's pretty,
Yeah.
Mm, yeah.
It's all
pretty
I
straightforward.
think I just like that level of clarity. It's just
Yes, I would so love to do that. That's why I kind of wanted to do the org chart, because I can like put that on the side.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Now, Anthony, where are we?
Yeah, I think, we talked about K inspecting and signing all payroll and expense warrants. And then the next four letters, L, M, N, and O, are sort of general requirements or responsibilities of the town manager to keep the boards informed, making recommendations as necessary, attending meetings unless excused, and going to town meeting and so on. They seem pretty obvious, but they do exist in a lot of charters, so we included them in your charter. So that goes through O. And then the last few relate to property. And 1B is to keep a full and complete inventory of all town-owned real and personal property. Usually those are done anyway because insurance purposes or other capital-related processes, you do that, but the charter would require this, a specific document that was the inventory of all property. And then Anthony, next page, and then this is the next one. Q, I think, is similar in the theme of who should be exempted if necessary. This is jurisdiction over the use of property of town-owned buildings, facilities, land, and so on. And the only current exceptions are the school committee. But I think going with the theme, we'd probably exempt the water and
I was going to say light and
and
water.
light.
Too. Yeah.
But you have some unique buildings under jurisdictions like the library or parks, ball fields, things like that are more unique and have some entity that usually is responsible for the policy around those. But this clearly would give the town manager some pretty significant authority over these buildings unless you exempted that for certain departments.
So pretty substantial change. I'm for it with regard to clarity, because right now, I'm surprised that different people, like Neshoba Praying Indians, have to appear before Park and Rec Commission in order to get Fay Park. That seems,
And if you look at our bylaws to this day say that's under the jurisdiction of the select board. But the select board somewhere along the line gave it to the Park and Rec along with other fields, so this is something that should be brought back
Yeah.
together.
so that, I share that perspective. The other part that I'm kind of shocked is that the center on Shattuck Street that just opened up closes at 4:30. It's the nicest building in the town. It's got all kinds of facilities,
Meeting space.
and they're not available at a time when there's people scrounging to find meeting rooms and stuff.
That's gonna be worked out though, from what the understanding.
I hope it will be.
Yeah, meeting rooms will be worked out,
Yeah,
but,
they have it arranged,
I'm sorry,
they have it arranged in the future that it'll be timed, which room you can use, you can get in and out, at a certain time it'll be locked back up, so.
Great.
That's being worked out. I agree, it is the nicest building ever, and it should be used.
I I think you're right. I think it should be some after hours there also. Not as much as probably the library has, because it's supposed to be a senior center, and unlike me, most all seniors, when it gets dark, they stay home, so. But there may be other groups using it, so.
I think the point I'm trying to make is from a residence, a one-stop shopping with the ability to go to the town manager's office with regard to the assets of the town. It sure would be nice to know that you can go there and get the permission or the process that you're looking for and not be redirected in multiple ways as exists today.
Well, he may delegate that authority
I was
to
gonna
those.
say, it still may not be going to one person to
Well-
get the answer, right?
Yeah, but
so-
still,
yeah.
it matters, even if he delegates it. If they're not following what he delegated, and he's not serving the
Then it's a
public,
problem,
you
yeah.
can go to him and say, they're not doing it right,
Yeah.
not what you said.
So it says here, so the- shall be responsible for the maintenance and repair of all these buildings. Is that's not true today? I mean, except for the school committee, like the library, they manage their own
I
building?
just think it's never stated anywhere that that's the
It's,
case.
that's the issue, it's just
It's
not
the
stated.
practice, but,
In practice it is, right?
yeah.
I'm just,
That might be a question when Jim walks past next time.
he's gonna be here.
I know, exactly.
So we,
He's
at
gotta
the
go out
end of
the
this,
back
if
door.
we have any time, hopefully we'll have some time at the end of this to put down some of the questions, or else afterwards we'll have homework. Because they're gonna be back, Jim and Mark have committed, I haven't heard back from Gary, I assume Gary will be here too in 2 weeks. Maybe he did, anyway, so we should have a list of some things we wanna ask them specifically in here, and I know we'll have an updated document to go through with them as well.
Should we ask
I did
the,
have,
the select board to come in separately from the town manager, so we have an independent perspective of what they think it should be? Just a question.
it's
I have no
a
idea.
good
I agree
question.
with that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, why are they split out throughout this document? I mean, it has to be a reason why. So I think it would be a good,
Not just one, have the select board, whoever can make, come in.
Well, can we do it in the same meeting, just have it timed from
Yeah.
X time to X time for you and?
Sure.
we have the
Different
first
time.
hour, the second
I
hour.
just meant separately.
Yeah,
you know?
no, I'm in agreement. I'm just trying to make it happen so that if we've already got 2 of the 3 that were asked to have responded, that they can make it. We can further define if you could be here at this time, and then
Yeah.
others later.
You wanna do that? Time them next at the
Sure,
meeting?
sure.
Separate them?
Be armed with your question.
I did have a question about Q and the leasing, because I can imagine something like this might spark a little debate. Presumably, when it says jurisdiction over the leasing and rental, any major leasing of town properties and land still goes to town meeting. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to take a unilateral decision to just lease the library. So I think, because that could sound a little shocking to some, unless we understand that that is, what that means is if a decision's already been made. You know what I mean? Like, we're not implying here that the town manager can just unilaterally decide to lease or rent a town property without consulting anybody else.
No, you're saying.
But that they would
Everything
manage the
is-
process of.
Everything you can do with any import is budget related anyway. It's all financial.
But something like that, though, would be bringing money in, not necessarily taking money out, so it might not, I'm just playing
Or
devil's
just like
advocate there,
the,
but yeah.
the
Still a
orchard
process.
lease, for
Contract.
example.
But I just don't know what, yeah, so you still got the whole contractual, the whole mass law and all those things for the whole procurement area, because if you're signing some kind of a contract, right?
Right. But I mean, the orchard lease, like, I mean,
Right.
putting aside any
Yeah.
of the sort of nuances of
Yeah.
that was, not something that the town manager would just necessarily say, gonna lease it, here's the lease, off we go. Like, there's a much more to it than that.
There was a town meeting vote
Right.
many years ago that authorized the board to lease.
Was.
the
So when we say
orchard,
juris-
and they've done a number of iterations since then, so I think they didn't go back for that, as I remember, but
So when we say jurisdiction over the leasing, we're saying
It's a
over
good
the decisions
question.
that have already been
Yeah, we
made
should just find out,
to
right?
lease?
Yeah.
Or, okay.
So this would give the town manager the authority to, enter into leases leases or even just sort of if someone were asked for the use of these properties, it's within the town manager's authority sort of solely to do that, assuming, again, there's lines here for exemptions, like to exempt perhaps school property or what have you, depending on the will of the committee. But yeah, under this, that power would be vested with the town manager and presumably, or town administrator, whatever the title is, and presumably, they would be, they would be evaluated on that. That if the town manager were to, I guess, engage in some sort of improper leases or something, that would ultimately come back to them when the lease is up. Now, the flip side of providing more oversight to the town manager, for example, to go to town meeting or to go to the select board, is and again, this, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but would be to slow down the process of entering into those projects or those leases, until there could be a meeting and until a decision could be rendered at that level. So on the one hand, by allowing the town manager to do it, you're really leaving it within their best judgment, and those things can happen rather quickly. Whereas you sort of, the flip side is to provide basically more process and to sort of slow those things down. Now, I guess I am curious in learning a little bit more about the orchard. Is it somehow legally distinct from the other property of the town? Is that why that sort of came up in the conversation?
Oh, God.
There's more.
It's a lot.
But I asked because, the lease will come up in 20 years' time, again, for a very charged piece of property, and I'm sure there are other pieces of property within Littleton that would have the same kind of complexity to them. And I imagine if someone just heard that the town manager had just upped the lease for another 10 years without consulting anybody, that would probably cause some challenges.
Well, the problem that I don't want to rely on this all the time, but I think an event like that would be so out the acceptable norm that would really be begging for the suspension and the removal sort of.
But if it says in the charter that he's allowed, or he or she's allowed to do it, I think we have to make sure that at least that there's some kind of understanding of that
But inherently,
charge.
isn't there a reasonableness? I mean, if they were to lease the library, I mean, there's consideration as to what's reasonable in terms of what the words are as opposed to what's extraordinary. That I was shocked as to the level of certification that Jim just told us about with regard to procurement and all those layers of professionalism. I guess I have inherent trust that there is some reasonableness aspect, but you're not wrong to raise the question. I would just argue that I think that norms of reasonableness constrain what would otherwise be potential words of empowerment within a document.
When you say the norms of reasonableness, whose norms?
I think reasonable people, I think that's a
Well, what if we have an
term.
unreasonable town manager?
Then they're going to be suspended and removed.
After
But
they've
under
signed
this,
a
if
contract. They've done what they're supposed to do. They've done their job.
So again,
No, you have to look at what judgment they used and so on. So just because you have a certain power under the charter does not mean you're not still subject to the authority and jurisdiction of the select board. The select board can get rid of you for making bad decisions, even if you have the authority to make those decisions.
So
if I want to rent out the senior center for a party on a Wednesday night, because we know it's open, and they got pool tables there, and coffee machines, and.
So that, then,
Say
sorry,
something to the effect of, if it substantially changes the use or the financial outlook of the asset, then it has to be approved by somebody else. I mean, not to wordsmith it or get too far in the weeds, but I guess to the point that has been raised.
and I wonder if this is getting into sort of onboarding of the town manager about what's expected for the specific Littleton nuances versus like broadly what the responsibility is. So maybe that's kind of where the division is. Like this is getting into splitting hairs.
Yeah, it's almost like there should be policies in town about some of these buildings and land and what can't on, and things like that. The suggestion I brought up, just little things like that. So how does that work? But that's not part of the charter.
Right.
But there should be policies in town.
So maybe
probably.
then, within the parameters of the policies of blah, blah, blah. You know, something that sort of says that this is a little bit parameterized. Your jurisdiction still has to fall under town policies or something.
I would assume that we actually.
That's not a bad suggestion, Charlotte. I made a note of that.
All right, so good. All right, so you're gonna look and make, see if you
Yeah.
can get some good wording for us on that one. Thank you, Mel.
The circular filing.
Okay, good stuff. All right,
The
like a charter
final
town meeting.
provision is just the catch-all that,
Yep.
you know, that the select board can also assign other duties of the town meeting and so on. So that's pretty standard language. So I'm going to turn it over to Anthony, but I think the idea is that we're going to, now that we've gone over both parts of this section, the executive session, we will change, make some changes and then go back to you and then probably introduce the next section. Although I understand you have some people coming in at the next meeting, so it might be a couple meetings from here on out.
yes, but it's important that we get the updated version that we have here as early
Okay.
as we can, so that we can get our questions together and so on, and be prepared, and get it to them to see as well.
Got it. Very good. We can do that.
What does that mean?
I mean, we
Give me a
can
date.
make some of these changes or, that we've talked about, so that you have a document that, can be discussed with your department head or your town manager, or select board. But, Anthony, that's your call.
Oh, yeah, so now that we've been through the memo, now we've been through sort of both of these big sections of, these are big sections of the proposed charter. We can sort of take all the notes and thoughts and put them together and then send you the revised document before your next meeting, hopefully well before, because we'd also want, I know that Jim is scheduled to attend, although I think he got kind of an hors d'oeuvre of that at today's meeting. I didn't know if you were gonna invite anyone else, so that might be something to consider.
Two of the select board members have been invited, Gary Wilson, who's our liaison, and Mark Rombacher, who at the time was the chair, he's not now, but, so so we have two select board members coming.
Betsy, would it be helpful if you want, I can update the tracker from the minutes of last meeting and
Please.
this meeting, so you guys
Oh,
can
that
have
would
it
be-
for your Monday
I also need that
meeting.
because Joe and I are also gonna give an update to the select board
Which
next
I also had
Monday.
a question about that. But,
Yeah, so the tracker is very
So I'll
important
get you
for
the
that.
tracker in the next couple of
Great.
days. And again, it'll just be a reflection
Right.
of the
Right.
minutes, so like rough,
Right.
and then you can
Thank you.
interpret
Yeah.
it however you like.
But I'm not letting these guys up because I'm still looking for a date on when we're gonna get this updated document. I know before our next meeting, but Friday afternoon doesn't really work for me. The Friday afternoon before. Can you give me can I have it by Wednesday or Thursday? People have time to look at
Next
it and
week.
see it. I mean, the town hall isn't even open on Friday afternoons.
Yeah.
So-
Wednesday of next week, you mean? Is that what you mean?
No, because
This
the meeting, our meeting's in 2 weeks.
Right.
So that's,
So when would we like them to get us?
yeah.
The
At
revision.
least by, well, I mean, I'd love to have it next Friday, but I don't, that's not gonna happen, I don't think. But by the next Wednesday, for sure.
Yeah, that's right.
I think we can issue by next Wednesday. Mel, does that seem
Yes.
too ambitious to you?
Okay.
No, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
And was Mel saying that he's prepared to give us the draft of the finance committee section? I thought, are you,
No,
you're not?
no, I'm
So
sorry, I didn't.
what is the next section that you were referring to?
So after you've kind of, I don't have the work plan that we have in front of me, but after you sort of button up, I don't want to say anything's finalized, but after you kind of button up this section, we'd be moving on to the next section on the work plan. I just don't have the work plan in front of me.
It's finance committee.
So I don't remember exactly what's
That's why I'm
coming up.
asking.
Rob knows, he says it's finance committee.
Well, I'm just,
I know, you're looking
I
at.
thought it was school committee.
Those are the articles, I think that. I
I'm
thought
looking
that
at the
our
work,
the work
I think
work
plan.
our
plan
Yeah.
dated March
said
2025.
Yes.
But that's saying August, September, so we're way, way, way ahead, and
Yeah,
yet,
that's,
Well, I don't think,
Next time, anyway.
right, but
Right.
again, I think once we, yeah. I mean, I'm still envisioning that we're gonna have this meeting next time with, and then after that, we're gonna have more stuff we wanna go do.
well, I think the point that I'm concerned about is, I think in our discussions, we've seen how overlapping. Tonight, again, we've had some MOU discussion that gets into numerous boards and committees. Finance committee with regard to what's the differentiated role between the town manager with that, some of the language we just discussed tonight, presenting the budget and the capital budget, things that I would argue seem very much in FinCom's role as executed over the last X years. And if we're now saying that town manager is going to do this, then that's the, I would say, emergence more of Ryan's replacement to take on more the mantle that I think right now, words and comments often seem like they come up from Steve Venuti and FinCom. A pretty dramatic change. So I'd almost like to see Finance Committee language sooner in order to test it out and vet it with, before this town manager responsibility gets to wet cement, if you will. Because I think it's a pretty dramatic change.
Well, I think it can be too. I just think at some point you have to kind of do this and then go do that, and we know we're gonna be going, I think that's part of the time, to me, that's part of the timeline.
So that's,
I agree
so-
with you.
So I'm welcome
Okay.
to have it sooner than later, because I think we'll then validate
Right.
and solidify whether what we've been working towards is still
Yeah, I
holding
think so.
in
And
light of the next
we'll-
stuff.
I'm sure there will be rework as we go through further down and learn more.
Yeah, we're going back and forth as we go on.
We're all gonna get smarter through this, hopefully.
Have we vetted draft Article 1 and Article 2 yet? We've gone through that?
Oh, the time, no,
That's the,
you started to do that the other day,
those are-
Kevin, we have not looked at, we actually, one we did not.
Right. The definitions?
We sent over the last, or whatever the most recent version of the proposed, or the draft charter is, it has the Article 1, which is, the general provisions, which is kind of the plumbing of the charter. So I know we did present that to you, we sort of told you that that's pretty much boilerplate unless anyone wants to raise issues. There's definitions and other things in there, but we can always go to it if anyone has issues, but those are generally pretty much the same across charters.
But we should still go through it.
Well, didn't we go through the whole legislative section?
Yeah, we went through the whole legislative
Yes, but we did
section.
not do Article 1.
And
I don't think we went through
Yeah.
Article 1. I think we just started on Article 2.
I see. I thought, yeah, that's possible.
No, yeah, when we discussed Article 2, we explained that Article 1 is kind of the plumbing in general. We wouldn't,
Okay.
I guess we weren't gonna have a meeting on it unless anyone wanted to raise a specific question around
Intro,
it.
kind of, yeah.
Do you have things that, Kevin, that you wanted to talk about?
I have a few questions, yes.
You prepared to go through them now? If Kevin brings them up now as questions on it? Or do you want to do
Yeah,
it when you
yeah.
schedule? You good?
I mean, we still have, I presume the meetings will plan to run until 8, so we have 15 minutes. We may not be able to resolve everything, but we can definitely have a discussion and start the discussion.
And I asked this question within the context of a strong town manager or town administrator, whatever we call it. Under Section 1.4, Division of Powers, it says the administration of all fiscal, prudential, and municipal affairs of the town shall be vested in the executive branch, headed by the select board. The legislative powers of the town shall be vested in a town meeting open to all voters. Is there any reason to mention, where is the administrative responsibility, and should we speak to that?
So the administrative authority is a component of the executive body. It's not, in that section, it's not usually mentioned explicitly, the town manager, unless you are in a council form of government, in which case the council, the analogy, in which case you have an elected council, which is the full legislative body, and then the town, and then well, some people call it different things, but I'll just say city manager is the full, it has all the executive authority that in your charter, the select board has, or that is distributed between the select board and the town manager or town administrator.
Yeah, I would have thought it might say that except as delegated to the whatever, but.
Well, there's a whole section about that, so when they get there, it will say so.
Maybe we could reference,
Town
say,
manager would be-
subject to Article
Do
X,
this.
the town manager or something.
I mean, isn't there inherently the understanding that the select board can hire and fire the town manager, and therefore the select board, that statement stands as the select board is the executive branch.
The chief executive, correct. Yeah. And the manager's the administrative officer.
The section is entitled Division of Powers, and it seems to me that we're shifting power as,
But not really, because it still resides with the select board. I mean, the town manager becomes far more powerful, but in fact, the select board still controls all aspects of the town manager's responsibilities and is accountable for all the actions of the town manager through all of us residents electing the select board.
so in the future, who's going to appoint the fire department chief, and who's going to appoint?
I think what I heard earlier in some offline conversations is the expectation is that the town manager will be the, person to appoint,
Right,
et cetera.
right.
But that's assuming.
It just
you
seems
folks
to me,
agree with that
that in a
recommendation.
paragraph entitled Division of Powers, that some mention of the town manager would be appropriate. But I'll drop it and move on.
Well, I was going to say, because we could put in a sentence here saying, the administrative authority of the town should be vested in the town. I don't know if we came down to the term town manager, town administrator. I'm going to stay with town administrator just because that's what you currently have. But we could draft something like that. I would say that's not common, but again, we could do that. And my notes had the select board still appointing the chief of police and the fire chief. Maybe I misheard or understood during the meeting.
That's what I thought. And town council, did we want to say those three?
Certainly town council. I think we should ask the question of the select board and of the town manager as to what their positions are with regard to hiring and firing of the strong fire chief, strong police chief. I'd like to hear what they have to say.
Don't look at me, get your list together, we want to get everybody's questions that they want to ask. And I want to get them ahead of time so we can put them together, and not just,
Well, is that what you're really asking for? Because
I'm really asking for questions. We may not be able to get to all of them, but if I hear them from everybody, what questions you really want to ask, then I can consolidate them
Okay.
and try to organize them a little bit, so we're not just
Well,
jumping all over the place.
Can we also,
that would
within
be good.
open meeting law, then route them around us so we know what questions are gonna?
As long as you don't discuss them, you can say, this is my
Yeah,
list, this is my
that's-
list.
I'm
That's
just
fine.
trying to
That's
clarify.
Perfectly fine.
I think it would be
And the
great if
ones
we
that
got,
have come up in the meetings so far, I can make sure are reflected in the minutes.
Excellent. Okay, yeah,
Questions?
all right.
Under definitions, Mel and Anthony, it says, under majority vote, unless otherwise required by law or this charter, a majority of those members of a multiple member body present voting, provided however that a quorum is present. Does this apply to the annual town meeting? Will we be having a quorum? I forget where we ended up on quorums.
You didn't have a quorum, and so that doesn't apply to your annual town meeting.
And we recommended no.
You don't have a minimum quorum number for your town meeting, so there's no lower bound.
I raised this point. I think you should get that clarified the way Matthew Nordhaus reported at the last select board meeting. It's not just merely a majority of those of a multiple member body present. That's not correct. It's a member, a majority of the number designated to be on that board or committee, and which is a very different
The
outcome.
quorum.
General law.
Right, right, a quorum must be present for a board to
And
meet.
the quorum is what the general law says it is. And that is,
But they can't vote, is that what you're saying? You can meet if you have a quorum, but they don't have the,
but why you
Can't even,
Three,
the way that was discussed,
not discuss something if you meet, you know?
But you're saying that there's a difference between if you have vacancies versus absentee.
correct, and
And so I
this
think if you
reads
have
as if,
if you have 7 people board, but only 5 people currently filling it, is the quorum amongst that 5, or is the quorum amongst the 7? And
No,
that's, I think,
so
the distinction.
I mean,
Four.
I don't know if we read, so the definition I'm looking at says quorum unless otherwise addressed by general or special law or regulation, a majority of the full complement of the members of a multi-member body. So, I mean, we could rephrase that, but the full complement to me is, all of the available seats.
Gotcha.
And that doesn't apply to the annual town meeting,
No.
that premise? Okay.
Correct.
Okay. This is a minor question, but my next question was, what's the difference between a multiple member body, which is a defined term, and a town agency, and are they, or are they overlapping?
They're overlapping. The multi-member body, every multi-member body is not necessarily, under this definition, every multi-member body would fall under the definition of a town agency. A multi-member body is a subset of town agency.
Okay. All right. That's it.
Again, not to beat a dead horse, but I'm curious, do you want to pursue that additional language to the separation of power, to the, distribution of powers? Okay, I don't see a big murmur, so I'll assume you want to keep the current definition.
Let's see, I had a couple non-related questions,
Okay.
if that's okay.
Yeah.
One was just, do you want anything from us for the select board meeting on the 9th that you said you would be presenting at, or
I
is
don't know
that
if we're
something we
presenting,
should do
but we're going to give it
anything?
an update, so.
Oh, okay.
I was planning to use your tracker, honestly, and a lot of it, to say, these are the things I'll go through that and say, these are the highlight, these are the big things we've discussed, and just see where it goes. And we haven't really discussed it yet, but
So
that's,
that'll be fine if I send you that
Yeah.
draft. And then the other thing is, we talked, I think you guys mentioned the newsletter. Sorry, for various reasons, wasn't able
it's
to
quite
submit an
acceptable.
update. But
And plus, we need to be told what the dates are and be before the day before it's due.
right, I think if we submit stuff before the 15th, then
Okay.
usually it makes it into the next
Okay.
one. So we'd be looking at submission by June 15th in order to make it into the July newsletter. So my question would be, do we want to submit something? And if so, what's the general feeling of what we want to submit? Is it just this is what we've been doing, these are the topics we've covered, or does anybody feel strongly about the content of that? And then I'm happy to work up a draft and circulate that at least to you guys for,
I'd be very general with it, and we just talk about the topics that would.
like, we've discussed this, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You could
And
say
I would
met with
say,
the board and
yeah,
discussed
you
the
guys have
following.
presented
Yeah.
to the select board, we've invited people to
Yeah.
speak to the committee,
And the
even though
meetings-
it hasn't happened.
And the meetings
yet.
are always open to the
Yeah.
public, and, yeah. General.
Making sure everybody knows where they can go to find the minutes and the meeting recordings, yeah. Okay.
And when we meet next time, besides just Gary and Mark, is it possible to ask the whole board if they want to attend, they can attend?
Sure.
Because they'd have different
If you're
ideas.
gonna, and plus if you're gonna have different times, I suppose, then that's fine. I can do that.
Then they need to post the meeting if they're gonna
Yeah,
have 3.
that's there, that's on them.
That's true, too.
Which is fine.
They might just send two.
Right.
Especially if they get the late shift.
Okay, so do we have a preference on that? I mean, I almost feel like Jim doesn't live here, so he should be first, so he can go home. And then select board later, because they're local, right?
That's fair, yeah.
All right, we give an hour for each? I mean, how much time do you want to do? You want to spend the whole meeting with these? We could probably do it, and we could probably get them engaged in conversation and go.
Yeah.
Do you want to do that? Or 45 minutes and
I
45
bet it will
minutes?
last that long.
45.
I bet it will last that
I
long.
would think so. So
Let's
you
go with
would-
45, and then we have 15 minutes for,
Leeway, yeah.
Okay, all right, so we'll have them start at 6, and then the next one at 6:45?
at 7.
Oh, at 7, oh, I see, tell them,
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
tell them,
I get it, yeah.
tell them 45
Yeah,
minutes, but
smart. Yeah.
schedule for an
Yeah,
hour.
we got a little.
Gotcha. Okay.
Unless put a little buzzer there that goes off at 45 minutes.
Yeah. Oscar music.
That's it.
Yeah, the playoff music.
We can count on Karen.
Right in the
anyway,
middle of a
keep
sentence.
on.
Sorry, that's
I know.
Oh, and sorry, the last thing I was going to
Yes.
say on the minutes, I got the note for the change on absentee. I don't know how, I'm going to blame AI for that one, but thanks for the catch. And I posted them sent them to Lisa to be posted.
Thank you.
So then, do you want to talk about the questions?
Can we release
For the
these
last-
guys, or
What's that? Oh, yeah,
can we release,
yeah. I
Mel
guess so.
and
Do we
Anthony?
need them in before you want to go? Oh, you want to talk about the questions for the meeting?
For the meeting minutes,
oh, the
for the
minutes.
last
Oh,
one.
yeah, yeah, you guys, could-
For
we're,
the-
we're doing meeting minutes next. If you guys want to take off, you probably could, I guess.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Talk
Thank
to you
you.
soon. Hey,
Bye.
do we have a meeting scheduled for the next Monday? Okay.
Assume yes.
Email.
So I had sent out the meetings from the last, whatever date it was.
Mhm.
I got feedback from Betsy. One was relatively simple, just strike the sentence about rescheduling. But then you also had a question about who, or what the meat of the comment was, and I think, Tim, it
That was
was
about the
something that you.
select board members.
Yeah,
being-
yeah, I saw that,
I think I printed the minutes this time. I'm so sorry.
well, I'm trying to remember exactly what I said, but what I thought I was saying was that an individual could hold two town positions, but could only be compensated for one. So it really didn't have to do, I mean, anyone could be on any number of committees, or,
So that's got nothing to do with a select board person? No, you're just talking about in general?
right, well, you know, if the DPW foreman could run for selectman,
Right.
he could be both, but he couldn't accept the nominal salary that the select board gets. He'd retain his
Right.
DPW salary.
I see.
But I guess in the context of that article we were looking at, it was kind of preventing board members from being on committees, and I didn't think we necessarily wanted to do that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's good that some committees have a designated selectman as a sounding board.
Yeah, no, I agree, yeah.
You too.
But as a voting member,
No,
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 that's a good point, no. As a liaison,
ex
that's
officio.
fine.
so I'm agreeing with that. So I think we, so long as it's ex officio, non-voting, that's great.
Okay, yeah, maybe we need that language, that it's not a, you know, you can't be a voting member of another.
So Gary is on the Personnel Advisory Committee, so he would be prevented from being on the Personnel Advisory Committee?
Voting member.
Prevented
Voting
from
member.
voting.
But he's a voting member
He's-
now.
he's-
And he has background to do that now.
That would be a change, because I was on that, I was a selectman and also on the advisory, and I had a voting power then.
What do you think?
Question to ask them.
Good or bad?
I don't have a comment.
So as far as the meeting minutes,
Okay, yes.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
is the statement in there
right.
accurate, or
Who
do
has
we need
a copy of the
to?
minutes? I'm sorry, I
I do.
usually have
I
it
do.
printed off,
Yeah,
but not
I-
this time.
I
Thank you.
rewatched it, it's almost a quote. What's written in the minutes is almost exactly
Well, I'm
what
sure
was
it's
said,
AI, it probably is, yeah.
which,
Yeah, I mean, I think I mean, the context of what we were discussing, it's not
Positions, but had to choose
as
one.
relevant as I thought it was, so the discussion we were having, but I think that's what I said.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I think the point you just brought up should go on the tracker, and then we,
yeah, right,
Yeah, separate
right.
yeah.
for this meeting.
So, yeah, the minutes should reflect what was said, not what you meant to say, or,
Oh, there you go. You can't change your
And
mind
that's-
afterwards. I
right,
didn't mean to
yeah.
say that. You can
clean
say
it
this.
up afterward, yeah, no,
All right, thank you.
okay.
Okay, so that's one change, so,
Yeah, just get rid of that one line, I guess, for everybody. Okay, then somebody make a motion, I should say, before we do that.
yeah, motion to accept the minutes of the May 19th meeting with the change of delete the last sentence in the minutes as presented tonight.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Aye.
I would like to point out, on pages 6 and 7 of the May town newsletter are 2 pages devoted to charter that Jim wrote. And so
Yes.
it's
that
very
was
possible
before.
well, definitely if we're gonna submit anything for the July, unless you really wanna be repetitive, it would be advancing aspects, because there's two complete pages that were more or less, what is the charter, how can you be involved?
I think that was the one that we wrote.
There was a shorter one,
There's
the
the one
first
from,
one,
the first one that we didn't write, that
was a
went out.
surprise. Right, and then you
Then
wrote
there
this.
was the one that I submitted, and that should be the May one.
Okay, then,
And
then great.
Yes, then the
I-
July one would
I didn't
build on
realize
that.
your involvement was in this, because it's pretty expansive and
Right.
well done.
We should be doing it, not them. We should-
Yeah, there was one, I
Fine
think,
with
in
that, I'm
the,
just more making sure we
April.
realize there's two pages
Something up
that have
there.
already been
No,
there.
we
yeah,
we
that
saw
was
it.
the one that
Right.
Betsy and Joe vetted, yeah.
Okay, and then I'm still working on the summer schedule. I didn't get a lot from people, so I guess there's, I guess I did hear from people, that people aren't taking that much time off, so that's good. And it's just working around the select board schedule, and they have off, and so, anyway, there will be some months where we don't have as many. Oh darn. But it sounds like we're in good shape on our schedule anyway, so that's good. Although I do think that going forward, we're gonna, obviously, some of these things are, it's gonna get tougher, and we're gonna have more people coming in to talk to us and so on. I also strongly encourage you, as you see people out and about, ask, and especially people that are on these boards and on these committees and so on, to either ask them what they think or tell them to come to us and ask questions.
Yeah.
I mean, be real open about that. We're talking about this stuff, so let us know.
You don't want to get too far down the line before
Yeah,
people
if you don't agree
come
or
at you with
something, yeah, come see us.
objections.
So, anyway, it's just
Yeah.
my 2 cents.
Well, can we put out like a notice to all the boards, like specifically like dear committee chair or board chair?
Well, I mean,
You know,
we
the
make it to the
charter
point where we want
committee
to,
is
bring them all in.
discussing
That's, I guess we'll have to decide that as a
Yeah. Because
committee, but I also think there's some,
until it personally impacts somebody, it tends to go over people's
That's true.
heads. So if
Well,
you kind of
but-
call it out and say,
maybe probably when we get to the next thing, when we
Right.
have something, say, this is where we're going, folks.
right,
What do you, come, again,
Well,
right?
Building off of some of what you've done, the org chart,
Mm-hmm.
for example, I think the org chart is gonna bring up the language would differentiate from what the existing org chart is in these ways, and then we could give a targeted, how do you feel about this? Because you currently have this MOU, which would now go away, and with it would incorporate the following with regard to accountability, hiring, firing, et cetera, those aspects. It could be a very targeted,
yeah, that would
communication.
definitely get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we should, and then again,
their
there's nothing,
attention, yeah.
I mean, this is
And
all
in
open. We
advance,
want,
I
to hear from people. If you really think it won't work for these reasons, I want to hear what they are.
That's
Then
always
you
the
decide,
trick. Give
okay,
people enough time
I hear
to read
you,
through.
I don't agree with you, or you do.
Fire drill
But
at
you
the
want to hear
end.
that stuff up front, I don't want afterwards, oh, shoot, I wish we had known that.
I know, yeah.
Ruh-roh. You don't want to do one of those, right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, awesome, anybody else? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right,
Move to adjourn.
Yes.
second, all in favor?
Aye.
Hey.